Hi, welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder. Today is October 22nd, 2020, and I've invited Heather Black, a senior integrated freelance producer from New York, to be our guest today. Heather currently freelances at 21 Grands with previous experience at such creative agencies as 72 and Sunny, Droga, Deutsch, and Preacher, on accounts such as Adidas, Coca-Cola, Facebook, Google, Harley-Davidson, and Under Armour. Her impressive experience is an asset to whomever she works with. Thank you for talking with us, Heather. How are you today?
Hi, Heather. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great.
Absolutely. I like your name.
I like your name too.
There's not many of us.
I was thinking, I'm like, I want to say something to her about her name. You beat me to it.
I've got to find this funny article for you that someone sent me once that pretty much after the show Heather,
Yeah.
or the movie Heathers, the name, no one ever used it anymore. So, it's so rare, I think, to find another Heather, especially like young kids now. I never hear of any other Heathers.
I'm with you there. I rarely meet another Heather. If I do, she's generally a product of the 80s. Like, we
Yeah.
had our time.
That's so funny.
I quite like it, actually.
I do too.
Yeah, I've only ever worked with like one other Heather before. So that's kind of nice. There's less confusion.
There's less confusion. And I think what's funny too, that sometimes it comes with some perceptions, right? They think they know what a Heather is. And then you come in and I feel like I'm not that perception. So I like that. That's enjoyable for me.
Yeah.
So
I think people often expect like a flower child.
yeah.
We wear a lot of like floral printed dresses and run through fields.
Yeah. Either that or really bitchy. So
Yeah.
well, I'm glad to have you here. It's really nice to reconnect with you.
Yeah, great to be here.
And we were talking earlier, you're in New York, and you're freelancing, and you're right near a school, which I thought was so amazing because you're hearing kids laughing and on recess, which I'm sure is just such a pleasant, odd experience in the middle of a pandemic. But it sounds like you're in a space that's a good place. You were happy to be in New York this whole time.
Yeah, I'm happy to be in New York. Like we were talking about earlier, I was like loving spending this time here in the city, and I feel like it made me fall in love with New York in a new way. And I felt lucky to have like rode out a lockdown in the city because I mean, knock on wood, this never happens to us again. But looking back on like April and May and being in Central Park at the height of spring, and it just seemed like the most glorious spring I've ever seen in the city before. And I don't know if this year was really extra special or not, or if it was just because I had all this time to really see it, but also just to like see the city without tourists, without half of its population here, to like walk down 7th Avenue and be the only soul around, or in the middle of Times Square and no one's there. I don't know if we'll ever see New York like that again.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible that you were there and you got to experience it,
Yeah, it was
having
wild.
lived there.
I had the rhythm of riding my bike down every Wednesday to the Union Square Farmers Market. And I live up in Harlem, so it's about a 45-minute ride. And it was like nice going through Harlem, beautiful through the park, but then to ride down 7th Avenue and Broadway to 14th Street and back and hardly see anyone, be outside like Radio City Music Hall and Rockefeller Center, and there's just no one. It was crazy.
That's crazy. That's crazy. I talk a lot about this idea of, we're in this moment of this shared humanity. We're all experiencing the same thing. But I think what New Yorkers experience is different because you live in a city that is so bustling and crazy and like over the top all the time. And to see it at such a quiet moment really allows you to have a different sense of reflection on your moment. I think it's cool. Well, that's great. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that with us. Sure. Okay, so your experience is so varied, and at least at the agencies, and that's amazing. You've had such a fortunate career of being at such creative shops.
Yeah.
Where'd you start out? Like, did you start out as an art producer? People rarely do, so I'm curious.
Yes and no. I went to photo and film school here in the city, and I graduated when the recession hit. And it took me like 8 months before I got my first job. And I just freelanced a little bit, like PAs on film and TV shoots and photo jobs, before someone who knew someone got me an interview with an executive producer at Droga 5. They were looking for a production assistant that would assist the head of production and then also assist across the various production departments, so digital and broadcast and art production. And it was a really small team at the time. I started in 2011, and small department. There was only one other producer in art production at the time, Maggie Lynch, and she was working under Cliff.
Maggie.
Yeah, love Maggie. Um, and yeah, Cliff was running the art production department, and Maggie was there, and I would help them out, you know, as I would all the other departments here and there. And then Maggie ended up moving back to, I believe, Cleveland. Yeah. And so there was this gap in the department, and Cliff had so much going on, and he brought me in to help. And eventually I moved out of my role as the production assistant into an associate producer role in art production. So that's really how I started. But I didn't know anything about production in advertising. I was just interested in production and interested in film and photo. And when they were like, we got, you know, if you want to interview over at this agency, I was like, sure, but I didn't know who they were, like what production was in advertising. And I remember when I first got the job and I started meeting agents or artists, and they were like, you know, they might come in and be like, wow, this is your first job ever. Like, do you understand like where you are? Like what kind of a big deal this is? And I really didn't for the longest time. But I feel really lucky to have started out there because I think it really gave me incredible experience and laid the groundwork for the type of creative work I want to be involved in.
Well, and it sounds like you had such amazing mentors, people to help you along the way.
I really did. Like Cliff was, I couldn't have asked for a better boss or a better mentor. He was such a champion for me. He gave me projects I was definitely not ready for, but allowed me to rise to the challenge and let me shine. And that's not always the case everywhere you go. I think it's rare to find someone who wants to see you shine and maybe not not take that for themselves. But yeah, I can, all I can say is he was just like such a champion for me, and I felt really lucky to have learned the ropes of art production from him and the other amazing producers he brought in, like Julia Manassa and Bianca Escobar, who's there now. And now that I've gone freelance, you know, I've been a lot of other places since I left there, but now that I freelance, I come back and jam with them pretty often, which is great.
That's so great. Well, let's talk a little bit about, I guess, the state of the industry right now and what you're finding as a freelancer, whether, you know, you're actually at an agency, which I know you are now, or where, you know, what you kind of were hearing out there over the last few months. Do you find that the freelance, you know, market right now is really hard, or are you finding that it's a little bit easier because everybody's needing help right now?
I find that it's incredibly hard right now. Since I went for, I mean, before this all happened, and, you know, let's just say like before end of March, I'd been freelance for a couple years, and I've been really lucky in that I've always been able to go from one thing to the next, and there haven't been gaps. And the last 6 months have looked wildly different than those first 2 years. I was free pretty much between April and August, and there was really not a lot going on. And maybe there was, but to be honest with you, come April, like I pretty much, you know, ended a stint with Droga. I was there for about 5 months or so, and I ended up wrapping up there at the end of March. And as everything hit, I felt really uncomfortable soliciting work, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
in the first couple of weeks, I reached out a little bit when we didn't know how long this was going to be. I think we all had this, you know, wild misconception that this would last for like a couple of weeks and we'd be back to normal. But as soon as it became clear to me that this was going to be a much bigger thing, and watching our city in a lot of pain, people around the world really suffering, I was like, this isn't coming back soon, and I just I don't feel it's appropriate to be looking for work at the moment. If someone comes to me and needs a freelancer, great, I'm so on board to do it. But as an integrated producer, I get a lot of emails from primarily production companies representing directors. So, it's a little bit different in the film world, where like it's not the production company generally reaching out about work. They have a separate rep who does that. And I just kept getting from certain reps emails like, "Hey Heather, are you looking for directors? Like, what can I help on?" And I just found it really like kind of
Yeah.
offensive. It's just like, now is not the time. So I didn't really even start reaching out until about the end of July, until things kind of started to look a little bit better. And I ended up coming on board at 72 and Sunny to work on a really fun project for a client of theirs, MGM, in early August. And I just wrapped up there a few weeks ago.
Will
But
you? Oh, go ahead.
no, that was just going to say that that's really been the only thing that I've worked on. But from other freelance producers I've talked to, it's been really, really quiet. And across the board, I don't know that there's any agency out there that hasn't either had to furlough or go through a round of layoffs. Like, agencies in general are just, for a while we're slower. And I think things are picking back up. But I think the freelance pool has grown,
Yeah.
given that a lot of people have lost their jobs. So I think there are less jobs out there, and I think there are more freelancers out there. So it's just going to be a little bit different for a while.
I agree. I mean, you've said a lot there that I'd love to like kind of break apart and touch on. The one is, the freelance pool. We run that freelanceartproducer.com site, which is free and it's just a resource for people. And I've definitely seen an uptick in people wanting to sign on, wanting to not upgrade, edit their profiles. There's a lot of more time being spent on kind of preparing for when they'll be ready to go. And I've also seen, a lot of times other art producers I know will ask me, who do you know? We're looking to hire. And I think I'm not being asked about freelancers very much, and I'm being asked few and far between for actual jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to let someone go and now they're looking to refill that, but it's small. So I think people are trying to do, or agencies and brands are trying to do with what they currently have. And instead of adding freelancers or adding positions and roles to their roster.
For sure. It's definitely a challenging time to be a freelancer, or to even be holding on to a position right now. I have several friends at agencies that are like, oh, we just went through another round of layoffs, or a client just left. And I think there's just a general uneasiness as we
Oh, definitely.
navigate
Yeah.
this new space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. And, kind of backing up to one of the other things that you said, just the idea that it didn't feel right to reach out. I know that feeling exactly. As soon as it hit, I just really pivoted and decided that everything that we were going to put out there was going to be solutions oriented. It wasn't hey, look at this pretty picture I made. It was, here we have this available for stock.
Right.
We are here to help you figure out what production is going to look like in the future. Whatever it was, anything that we put out there was very, very solutions oriented.
Yeah.
And all my photographers, stepped up to be present for the community in ways that would be helpful, so that they could kind of, I don't know, all of us felt like we needed to do something. I mean, during that time, I did not make a dime, and nobody was working, but I was busier than ever because I felt this. I always said, if karma were a currency, right? Like, we'd all be pretty wealthy by now, because everybody in the industry was like helping each other and getting to know each other and having conversations. And that part felt really useful and so positive. And, it reconnected everybody, I think.
Yeah, I think it did. I think there was a lot of that. I also think it I think a lot of people's insecurities came out too in ways that maybe people
Well,
like
that's
you, like
true.
agents, maybe didn't realize in their photographers, like, having photographer friends or friends who are agents. And I think especially in the beginning, there were a lot of creatives, whether it's photographers or directors, that like didn't understand why there wasn't work. And I definitely got, I was reached out to a lot by some artists who were like, "Do you have anything? Do you have anything? Like, I'm ready to work. I'm ready to work." And it's like, there's really just nothing right now. And it's really hard to say to somebody, like, just sit tight. Like, when you're
Yeah.
dependent on this type of work that is so up and down, even in the best of times, right? Like,
Yeah.
to go through something like this and just like go through a major drought is really hard. And to just like sit with that and not be able to do anything, it's really hard feeling helpless. But let's hope that we're on our way out of it, especially with these new like solutions and productions to keep things moving forward as much as we can.
Yeah. I mean, and everybody worked really hard in,
Yeah.
in the industry to kind of figure out what those protocols were and or are, and how to create, I keep saying this, but how to create meaningful content within those protocols,
Yeah.
right? Like, how do they not become a limitation? And I think we've all done a really great job of, being there for each other and trying to figure that out and offering transparency, right? There were photographers who were figuring things out, were speaking up and raising their hand saying, "Hey, call me if you have questions. Like, I want to teach you how to do this.
Yeah.
Let's get the industry shooting again."
Yeah. I saw a lot of that. I also saw a lot of something I really loved was that I saw a lot of photographers offering just general mentorship
Yeah.
to younger photographers, emerging photographers. Um, yeah, just like really offering their time while they had the time, sort of being like, generally, I'm not able to teach anyone or offer advice, and now I have the time. So it was nice to see that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think I can give the example of Tim Towder in our group was
Mhm.
doing these 7:30 in the morning Instagram lives for a half an hour or an hour, however long they lasted. And he got so much out of answering questions from people.
Yeah,
And other people got a lot out of, being able to have access to him. And he's made relationships with people that he wouldn't have otherwise. And he, while of course he would much rather be shooting and having the industry be shooting, he took advantage of a time and put himself out there. And, it was a really positive experience for him doing that.
that's awesome. Yeah.
Well, what was your shoot like in August? Was that the first time you were on set afterwards?
No, so it was crazy actually, because the campaign in and of itself was three shoots that were used for one. Well, it's hard to say. It was an integrated job. It was a broadcast commercial along with a print campaign, and we had three shoots. And for the broadcast, it was all stitched together. And that was done mainly because of the location. So we needed to shoot the Bellagio fountains in Las Vegas. There were professional athletes shot in Vancouver. And then there was a celebrity shot in LA. And it gets really interesting where, in cases where you have certain states that are red states, right? That you have to, like, certain states can't travel to or from. If you do, you have to
Correct.
quarantine. And then when you're on deadline, it's like, wait, how do we shoot Las Vegas and then send the director to Vancouver? Oh, wait, we can't because
Right.
a lot of Americans. And then, wait a second, we can't go to California because then we'd have to quarantine coming back. So it was just like a really nutty puzzle, but was able to be worked out through getting remote crews at each of those locations. We worked with a different photographer in LA than we did in Vancouver, and everything was done remotely, and it was actually super smooth. It was my first remote shoot. It was going to be a massive shoot, and I was like, this could be just a total disaster. How do we feel like we have any type of creative control when we are behind our screens? But I was really shocked and impressed with how smooth it was, how buttoned up it was. It went great. I mean, I would not, if I had the choice of doing a remote shoot or being on set, I will hands down every time want to be on set. But I don't think there was any level of quality lost in doing it remotely. And
Did you use the same director and photographer to go to each city, or did you have to change that up?
we had to change that up.
Yeah.
Well, it was the same director who shot in LA and Las Vegas. So that was the same director for that. And then they had a remote director in Vancouver taking the overall direction from the director.
Okay.
Photography wise, it was a different photographer in Vancouver than it was in LA.
And do you find that you spent a lot more time in pre-production?
Well, yes and no on certain things. Like I would say and I would say what's easier to do in person are things like wardrobe styling, like a fitting day.
Yeah.
It's a little bit easier just to have the creatives and the clients like in the room, bring the talent in, let them see it in person. Yes, no, stylist is there with like options in their hand if you don't like something. Remote's a little different in that you're not really doing like a live, you could do a live wardrobe session, but at least on our project where it was like video and print doing wardrobe sessions together, different wardrobe needed for both, it just made more sense to let the stylist have a fitting and then send us photos later. But then if you want to switch anything up, you have to wait to get photos back. And so that process was slowed down a little bit, not majorly. Callbacks are done remotely, and that almost works easier.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying that they're really enjoying that.
Yeah,
My photographers are saying, especially, seeing people in their own homes,
yes,
especially if it's a video casting, right? Asking them to send videos, that people seem a little bit more relaxed, and if they have Zoom meetings with them, it's much more. There's more of an authentic connection.
yeah, for sure. But I would say, other than like little things like the wardrobe styling, which can still be worked out remotely, it's pretty much just as quickly. I didn't feel like pre-production was any more difficult or took longer because of the remote process. I mean, some extra thought, of course, has to go into what the remote setup's going to look like, and it gets tricky thinking about like because it's different from client to client and creative to creative, but sometimes on set there are certain creatives that are happy depending on the client to have the client involved right away, and then there are others that are like, well, I want to review shots as they're coming in with the photographer first and then only show those things that I'm happy with to the client.
Yeah,
And it's easier and more it's easier to handle that diplomatically on set than it is to then prep for that, right? So if you're doing a remote shoot, you have to have those conversations with your teams ahead of time and be like, well, what breakout room are we going to put them
yeah.
in? And it becomes more
Well, there's a dance that
smooth
you have to
talk.
figure out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that takes a little bit more thought and preparation in a way that you don't really need to do that until you get on set and you kind of like feel the vibe, or going into it how to coordinate things.
And did you have anybody on set, or just the photographer and the director and the
Just the
crew?
cruise, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's great.
excuse me, that's not correct. We sent the executive creative director and one of the clients to the shoot in California, not to Canada.
Oh, interesting. So how did that work when those people were on set and others weren't? Was that more challenging, or was there not even a hiccup?
It wasn't more challenging. I actually think in some cases it kind of helped because we had a direct line of communication, of course, to our client and the ECD. So if you weren't getting some answers, maybe if the line producer was off, sort of like handling a situation, but you needed to get their attention right away, you could, you had a couple people on the ground, you could be like, hey, could you go grab so and so, let them know we're like, we need to hop on the phone. So in a way, it was helpful.
Now, what about estimating during this time? I know a lot of people have questions about, adding in all the PPE and the COVID protocols, and it brings up the cost, and then a usual shoot that would have been maybe 2 days is now 3 days. um, have you had experiences where that has had to happen and clients don't understand, or do you feel like now clients are on the same page and they understand that we're not as well oiled of a machine in terms of how much content we can create in a day, and there are extra steps and extra time that has to be put into this? Are they clear on that yet?
Yeah, and I actually think that clients are more understanding because they understand that they don't understand, if that makes sense. They're
Yeah,
kind of like,
yeah,
well, we just trust you to handle this shoot safely, and we're down to cover financially whatever we need to do in order to make our shoot happen. Because what they don't want to have happen is to be shut down because safety measures aren't met.
yeah,
So they really, I feel like, put a lot of trust in their production teams to just say, hey, I trust that you're going to handle this, and whatever you need from us to make that happen, we're here for that. So it has made estimating a little bit more challenging just because these are new costs that we've never needed to work with before, right? Like COVID safety officers and COVID tests. And there's so many different ways you can get a COVID test, and how quickly you need results, and how you schedule out your shoot from there. So there's definitely more cost to think about, and more, it's almost its own separate timeline too, when you're literally dependent on labs and results.
yeah.
But I think everyone's been pretty understanding.
That's great to hear, because I know in the beginning, those very, very first shoots, there were some clients who were absolutely knew exactly what was going on, and others who were just so happy to be shooting again that they didn't understand.
Yeah,
Wait, what? We're going to have protocols. We can't be on set, all of that kind of stuff. And especially those in the beginning, I don't think a lot of people wanted clients on set in the beginning because they were figuring it out for the first time too.
yeah,
So having that remote, having it be remote was helpful in those situations, because again, I say this a lot, but we were all pioneers, those people who shot in July and August, and we're doing it for the first time, and helping figure out what the future was going to look like.
for sure. Yeah.
What about marketing to you? I know, as a freelancer, it must be hard for people to stay in touch with you and kind of share with you their new work. Or are you open to that as a freelancer? I know it varies a lot.
Heather, that's an interesting question. And I kind of love that as a freelancer, I don't have, no one can find me at an agency,
Yeah.
or they do. If I was just at Droga for 5 months, and so when people know that I'm there, of course they can contact me at my Droga address, and I don't mind that. I don't mind the marketing to my Droga address. What I don't like is the marketing to my personal address, which I understand that people want to do that as I'm freelance. I, yeah, I don't mind it. I just, I, it,
No, you're
it's,
not alone. I mean, running the freelance art producers site, one of the biggest questions I get all the time is, okay, but if I put my email up there, are people going to find it and mark it to me? And
yeah,
I say, maybe,
yeah,
but if you put a note on there that says this is for, job solicitations only,
yeah,
that might help. And I think, I mean, I hope that people recognize that a personal email is so much different than a regular email, right? A
right,
work email,
right,
and not bombard people with it. I'm always really careful about that too. I mean, I'm sure there are personal emails on my database, absolutely, like on my emailing list. And I'd like to think that I have asked, permission to send to those people.
yeah,
I'm sure a few have fallen through the cracks, but I also hope that those people who get them, who don't want them, would speak up and say, this is my personal email address. I prefer not to.
yeah,
I think if so many people have gotten better with email etiquette, although maybe not now in the pandemic, because that's probably one of the only ways people have to market. But for a while there, I know people were trying really hard.
yeah, yeah. I'm kind of like, I don't really mind all that much one way or the other. I think like a lot of people don't know how to find me in my personal email address, so that filters out a lot. Maybe I'd have a different opinion if I was getting bombarded.
Yeah.
Sometimes when, in an agency, I might get like, on my agency email, I might get over 50 a day. And
Wow.
that's a little bit much, but right now I don't get that many, and I have happened to be somebody who really loves film and photography, and a lot of the time I like what people are sending me. If I don't, then I just quietly unsubscribe or send them to a certain folder. But
Yeah. How do you find your work, right? If you get a spec sheet, right, of a creative comes to you and needs you to find some artists for them, what is your process?
I get asked that question a lot, and I think it's a couple of things. I think automatically you start to think about the people you already know, or applicable work you've seen that might be right. I kind of run through. I keep just a vast library, right, of photographers. Like, if I ever meet anybody new, they go in there and get filed in a certain way. And so I sort of start with my own sort of library or collection of creatives, and I go from there. If not, I tend to, look at agency sites like yours. I've heard a lot of people say they find new artists on Instagram and things, which I have as well, but I don't, if I'm getting a brief, I'm not going to open up my Instagram account and start scrolling, because it's just like, social media is just so random. You don't know who you're going to see on that day. I would never solely depend on that.
Has anything stuck out to you recently? Is anyone doing anything interesting from a marketing point of view that has, seems to caught your attention?
I don't think anything new lately.
Hmm.
Not really. I think people, I think art producers probably have a different opinion on marketing than I do. I've always just said, like, keep it really simple and don't
Yeah.
spend a lot of money on it. And you're you're an agent, so I'm interested in like your take on this too. And I'm sure like we think differently, but I will just say that everywhere I've been as a full time producer, no one has any desk space. Like, we all work in these like open environments, and now we're all working from home, and there's just not a lot of space to like keep things, even if it's a postcard. And so I think that
Yeah.
those are important, and I'm not saying they're
No, I'm with you.
yeah, I
We
say
valued them for so long, but
yeah,
it, with the open space and now the pandemic,
yeah.
we haven't
I
sent one
say,
out
like,
in quite a while.
certainly mail things, and I just think that like a physical reminder and a digital reminder is great. I think the most important thing is like reach out in both a physical and via mail. Don't show up at someone's door. um
Oh my
you know
God, could you imagine?
there are some certain people out there, I think, that would.
Right. Yes, let's not go there. Let's not give people ideas.
But yeah, I think just like the goal should be, hey, I want to remind Heather that I exist and that I'm a photographer and that this is what I shoot. And you can do that really simply and really cheaply.
Yeah.
I just hate seeing beautiful promos recycled. And I know how much work and how much money and how much love goes into the making of those things. And it is crushing when you see them destroyed. And I've had to throw things out myself just because I don't have the space for it. Um, but yeah, I say like definitely mail things. Maybe wait until people are at agencies again, because it's probably going to be too much like manpower to find everyone's personal
Oh my gosh.
if they're even comfortable sharing it. But yeah, I think generally like just a simple postcard, or I love a handwritten note. Like, I think anything that feels personal, what definitely feels maybe like something not worth keeping is something that feels very clearly as being like sent out to
Yeah.
thousands of people. And then just short and sweet and personal emails with new work, or whatever. I think sending the emails with new work is important, because even if somebody doesn't open it, just seeing your name in their inbox, like boom, like you're
Always say
you're
that.
you're, you're in
Yep.
the brain. And even if I don't open that email, like, you're there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I feel like there's value in you knowing that I've got something going on. I'm
Yeah.
doing something, whether or not you engage with it at that moment, because who knows when it's going to
Yeah.
reach you. That the idea of interruption marketing, people have to remember, like, I'm literally interrupting you every time I send you an email,
Yeah.
right? So I want to send you something
Yeah.
that's going to make you remember me so
Right.
that you can choose to come see me at some point,
Yes.
right? I want to get you away from the interruption and
Exactly.
get you to the actual engagement. And I'm going to continue to sadly, sorry, it's all many tools. I don't have many tools in my toolbox, but send you stuff that interrupts you.
Yeah.
But hopefully, it's of value.
Yeah.
At some point, Marianne and Campbell and I used to do this. We called it an appreciation trip, and we miss it so much. But we basically would go to New York together, even though she has photographers that we compete against.
Mhm.
She and I would go to New York together for a week, and we would take our biggest clients out, breakfast, lunch,
Mhm.
dinner, do little mini appreciation things at their agency, whatever we could do to show them we're just coming to say thank you. We're not coming to, you know, we're not interrupting you. We've asked so much of you through the years,
Yeah.
right? And through that particular year, like,
Right.
we just want to come and say hi and say thank you. And it was so well received because, one, it was authentic, and Marianne and I did it together, and we're best friends. So
Mhm.
people, we've co-marketed forever, ever. But also the fact that, like, I, we recognize that, like, we ask a lot of you guys.
Hmm.
So it was a nice, I miss it. I do. That's
Yeah.
one of the parts of traveling that I really miss.
Yeah. That's a really thoughtful idea, and I think those things go a long way. The kind of it's a very non-salesy approach, right? And I think that that's really palatable. Um, is just forming authentic relationships with people, taking it out of like taking the work out of it sometimes, or
Yep,
taking the prospective job out of it, and just being like, hey, can we just like have a connection as like two people and go from there. Like, I think,
and learn from each other and be a resource for each other.
yeah,
I think that
you're gonna
speaks
be
volumes.
somebody that they're gonna want to work with,
Hmm.
like, oh, I really enjoyed my lunch with Heather. I have a feeling if we went into production on something, she's going to be really easy to talk to, and we're probably going to have a good time.
Exactly.
Like, that just
And
goes
also, like, you might think, oh, let me check out Heather's photographers.
right.
And you might check them out, and they might not be relevant,
Yeah.
which is perfectly fine. But we're not in that sales relationship where I'm trying to push anything on you,
No.
and you're pushing away. So, um, well, yeah, I think that's such an important thing for people who are listening to recognize that the relationship really matters, especially now. I had a conversation with a rep yesterday about the idea that it's so sales focused right now because we can't do the relationship thing as easily as we could before, traveling around, getting to know people, that sort of thing. So a lot of reps are starting to feel like they are put in that sales position and they're not liking it because they've
Yeah.
appreciated the other aspect of what they're doing. So
For
it'll be interesting to see how agents and reps kind of pivot a little bit, and
sure.
figure out how they're going to stay not relevance, that's the wrong word, how they're just going to maintain those authentic relationships and make new ones.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's
Yeah, I
interesting.
think that's the hardest part right now. I hear a lot of agents and reps talking about this, is like, how do we form the new relationships? In the
Yep,
past, you could, go into an agency you had a great relationship with, and be like, hey, let's go to lunch, like, get your team together, let's meet, Wednesday for a lunch, and they'd bring whoever new might have started, and that
exactly.
yeah, that was
And
just such an easy and organic way to meet, you know,
yeah,
new.
now a LinkedIn connection doesn't do it, right?
No,
Like,
no, no, no.
and LinkedIn is starting to get salesy. I
Yeah,
reach out a lot on LinkedIn, and I'm just like, oh God, like, I got to do it because I want to be connected.
yeah,
But at the same time, it doesn't it. I'm trying to take those connections and put them towards something, make it something more valuable. So
for sure. I
it's
feel
hard.
that a lot in what like being a freelancer and trying to connect with new agencies. Like, I feel really lucky that I've been busy since I went freelance, but I've also been really busy with like a lot of the same agencies. So I freelance mainly for Droga 5 and Preacher, and have started working with 72. And there's been other ones, shorter stints within there, but there are so many agencies out there that I'd love to meet and work with. But yeah, LinkedIn is kind of one of the only ways to really, outside of, knowing somebody through somebody, LinkedIn is really the best way to meet a lot of people you don't really know. But it's such a big black hole of possibility that it's just
Oh my
hard
gosh,
to get,
totally. Well, and it's how you and I reconnected,
yeah,
you know?
yeah, exactly.
So
And I'm
I don't know.
terrible at LinkedIn. Like I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not a big social media person anyway. Like I don't have Facebook. I keep an Instagram. I mainly only post my own photography on there. But yeah, LinkedIn I forget about. So like I'll go into my account and it's like I have to, they're like, you have 320 something things to approve. And I'm like, oh gosh. Yeah, so I'm hit or miss with that, but it is an essential tool, I guess.
That's great. Well, listen, we're almost wrapping up, and I always ask these two questions. And I was talking with someone the other day, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't ask them anymore. And they're like, oh my God, no, everybody loves those last two questions. So, as repetitive as they are, I'm wondering if you were not a producer, what would you be? And what's your favorite thing to do on a Sunday?
Well, I'll start with the career question first because I kind of ask myself this question every day because I love doing so many things. I could picture myself doing or being a lot of different things. I love to cook. I could totally see myself being a chef or a pastry chef. I love interior design. I'd love to study interior design. I'd love to have a design studio. In fact, that's something I kind of want to do like on the side. I don't know when I'm going to find the time to do that. I direct films and shoot photos myself, so I could see myself being a photographer and director full time. A prop stylist, a professional tennis player. I'm not good enough, but I love tennis enough
Oh
that
my gosh, I love
every
this. You've got so much in you. That's fabulous.
um yeah, it would I feel like it would be hard to just pick one of those things.
That's great. I love that. Okay, and what's your favorite thing to do on a Sunday? I probably could guess it has something to do with Central Park.
It does.
Um,
It does.
yeah,
So every Sunday, well, Sundays look different for me now during this time period.
true.
But, I play tennis. I play doubles every Sunday. Generally Central Park or the red clay courts in Riverside. That is really like the highlight of my weekend.
That's awesome. Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
Well, Heather, it was so fabulous to reconnect with you. I really enjoyed our conversation even before we started recording. That was a great part of my morning. And then obviously, this conversation is really insightful, and I know that our listeners will find it really valuable. So, thank you so
Great.
much for taking the time.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me on. This was great. Really, really enjoyed this conversation.
Well, enjoy the rest of your week and your Sunday when it comes around. We're almost there, thankfully.
Yeah.
And I hope we talk soon.
Same, Heather. Thank you so much.
Totally.